The front page you read during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The CIA had already written it. Between 1953 and the early 1970s, the Central Intelligence Agency ran one of the most audacious domestic propaganda operations in American history. We're not talking about foreign broadcasts or leaflets dropped over Moscow. We're talking about newsrooms in New York, Washington, and Los Angeles. We're talking about reporters, editors, and publishers who took CIA money, sometimes knowingly, often not. And the public had no idea. The operation had a name, Mockingbird, and it started not with a master plan, but with a crisis of confidence. After the Korean War ended in 1953, American intelligence officials worried that Soviet propaganda was winning hearts and minds abroad. The solution, they decided, wasn't better truth, it was better control of the narrative. Allen Dulles, the CIA director, had connections everywhere. His law firm had represented major newspapers. He'd worked with journalists during World War II. He understood something crucial. You don't need to own a newspaper to control what it prints. You just need to own the people who work there. By 1954, the CIA had recruited journalists at major outlets: the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time magazine, the Associated Press. Some knew exactly what they were doing. Others thought they were simply patriotic sources helping America win the Cold War. The distinction mattered less than the result. Here's what you need to understand. Mockingbird wasn't about planting obvious lies, it was subtler. A journalist would receive a tip from an intelligence source who was actually CIA. The tip was true or true enough, but it served an intelligence agenda. The story got published, the public read it, and nobody questioned whether the news cycle had been engineered. The Iran operation in 1953 is the clearest example. The CIA wanted to overthrow Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. Before the coup even happened, American newspapers were running stories about his communist sympathies and his threat to Western oil interests. Those stories shaped public opinion. They made the coup seem necessary, even inevitable. But here's the irony sitting right in front of us on this shelf. The journalists involved, many of them, genuinely believed they were reporting the truth. They didn't see themselves as propagandists. The CIA wasn't forcing them to lie outright. It was simply curating which true stories got told and when, and with what emphasis. By 1961, when the Bay of Pigs invasion was being planned, the operation was fully mature. The New York Times knew about it. Reporters had the story. But the CIA asked them to kill it for national security. The Times complied. The invasion happened. It was a catastrophic failure, and the public only learned about the CIA's role years later. The Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962 was Mockingbird operating at peak efficiency. The CIA fed stories to journalists about Soviet missiles in Cuba. Some of those stories were accurate, some were exaggerated. All of them shaped how Americans understood the crisis unfolding 13 days of nuclear brinkmanship. What the public didn't know, what the journalists publishing these stories didn't know, was that they were reading a script written in Langley, not word for word, but strategically. The CIA wasn't just reporting on the crisis, it was shaping how Americans perceived it. The operation expanded into television and radio in the 1960s. CIA operatives posed as news consultants. They advised networks on coverage. They provided background briefings to anchors and producers. The line between journalism and intelligence became so blurred that even the journalists couldn't always see it. The Vietnam War is where the cracks started showing. The CIA was feeding stories to reporters about progress in the war, but journalists on the ground were seeing something different. By 1968, the Tet Offensive shattered the narrative. The public realized they'd been fed a version of events that didn't match reality. The operation didn't end there, but it was wounded. In 1973, Seymour Hersh at the New York Times published a story about the CIA spying on American citizens. It was the first real public accounting of what the agency had been doing. Congressional investigations followed. The Church Committee in 1975 finally exposed Operation Mockingbird to sunlight. What the Church Committee found was staggering. Over 2 decades, the CIA had relationships with at least 50 American journalists and news organizations. Some were paid directly. Others received favors, access to stories, intelligence briefings, protection from prosecution. The quid pro quo was rarely explicit. It didn't need to be. One detail from the investigation sits with me every time I walk past this exhibit. A CIA memo from 1957 instructed case officers to recruit journalists to plant stories. Not to report on events, to plant stories. The language is clinical. The implication is devastating. After the Church Committee, major news organizations officially ended their CIA relationships. But the damage was done. Public trust in media, already eroding over Vietnam, took another hit. people began asking, if the CIA had corrupted journalism once, what's stopping them from doing it again? The deeper question haunts us still. How much of what we read during the Cold War was journalism and how much was intelligence? We'll never have a complete answer. Records remain classified. Journalists who participated are mostly gone. The operation was designed to be invisible, and in many ways it succeeded. What we do know is this: for 20 years, American citizens believed they were reading independent journalism. They were reading a curated reality. The CIA didn't need to own the papers. It owned the flow of information. And that's a distinction worth remembering every time you encounter a story with an unnamed source, or a perfectly timed revelation, or a narrative that seems to serve someone's strategic interests. Subscribe. Each week we uncover another Cold War operation the public wasn't meant to know about.